All right, great. So hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And for those who are going to watch it later, for those of you who don't know, my name is Dylan Hall. I'm the Vice President of UCF College Democrats, and I'll be serving as one of the co-moderators for tonight. Before we kind of keep the introductions going, I just want to thank UT for their involvement with tonight's event. This has been a great collaborative effort, and I've worked very closely with UT's president, who will hopefully be hopping in later. If not, her name's Claire, and she did a great job of helping us set this up. So I appreciate everything that they've been able to do. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to my co-moderator, Daniela, and then we can get started.
Hi, thanks, Dylan. My name is Daniela. I'm the current communications director for UT Dems. Unfortunately, our president can't be here until later, but we are very excited to hear the speakers tonight, and I'm really excited to see some familiar faces here.
Awesome. So without further ado, before we hop into the questions, and trust me, we have a lot, I would like to allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves. So I'm going to first pass it to Rep. Carlos.
Well, hello and good evening. I am Florida State Representative Carlos Guillermo-Smith, and I represent Florida House District 49, which is East Orlando in Orange County. That includes the UCF area. So I am very excited to see a lot of Knights who are here, who are joining us today. Thank you. Thank you to all the college Democrats who are here, because I know we have college Dems from Orlando and from Tampa as well. And actually, I am joining you from my Capitol office in Tallahassee. I was not able to get out early enough, so I'll be driving back to Orlando tomorrow. But it is great to be here, and it's an honor to be here with some of our other distinguished panelists, including one of my colleagues from the Florida House as well, to talk about a really, really important issue to all of us, which is gun safety in the state of Florida.
Awesome. And I would also throw in Carlos is my boss for this semester, working as a fellow with him. So I'm really happy that he was able to come out today. It looks like Rep. Hunschofsky might have had to go for a sec. I think she might have reached her destination, so hopefully she can hop back on. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass it to Erin.
Hi, y'all. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm Erin Wiley. I'm a volunteer with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, over here in our Tampa local group. I know over in Orlando, y'all know our Orlando moms pretty well as well. We're an organization that is grassroots, working on ending gun violence. We kind of started right after Sandy Hook, and now there's over 6 million of them. So I'm just one of the moms, and I hope that I can be helpful here tonight. Thanks.
And thank you. We definitely appreciate Moms Demand Action's representation here tonight. I next want to pass it on to Maya.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm really, really excited to see some of you guys again, because I was able to work on election day with some of the college Dems at UCF. So thanks for inviting March into this space. I am a state board member, and I am on the communications committee. Specifically, my title is social media, but as we all know, you end up wearing many hats in this field of work. So I'm really, really excited to be here tonight, and really excited to get into it and discuss what we've all been working on and what we can do to continue this work.
Awesome. I want to thank all of our panelists again, and then hopefully Rep. Hunschofsky can join us again. But in the meantime, I think we're going to get this show on a road. So the first question that I have, and this one kind of goes for everybody, just because I think it's a good way to start. Well, it's not a happy thing, but I think a good thing to kind of start setting the conversation. And this first one, I'll let Erin go first. What was your reaction to the January 6th
insurrection that we saw happen at the U.S. Capitol? Well, for me personally, I think my reaction was one similar to most people. It was disgust and horror and just so much upset and heartbreak that we could see something like this happen in our own nation's capital. It was disgusting and scary, and it made us worry about what would happen in our state houses, around the country, about all of our, representatives and state senators that are in Tallahassee. We were concerned for our people as well. It was really scary, and I really hope that they're able to finally finish identifying all these guys because they belong in jail.
Representative Smith?
Well, that is a deep question about what happened on January 6th. I mean, first of all, I was horrified, as we all were horrified. And I think that in the last 4 years, we've all, in some way, shape, or form, become numb to just all of the terrible news and the disgraceful way that former President Trump conducted himself while in office. And I think that that in part of that, the numb feeling that you have, I think, has left some people kind of with a sense that it's still people are still trying to grasp exactly what has happened. And I want to be very clear about what's happened. Our own president incited a violent mob, not just against a random building, against the United States Capitol, for the sole purpose of interrupting the very, very solemn responsibility of counting the electoral votes to elect a new president of the United States. And his conduct during the insurrection of never intervening to stop it, of never calling in the National Guard to protect those members of law enforcement, those members of Congress, his own vice president, as they were trying to do this, as he was elated, reportedly running around the White House asking people, why aren't you excited about this? Because ultimately, what was he trying to do? He was trying to use his supporters, which he has done before, in a violent way, as he did as he did with another governor in our country, before she was a plot to kidnap her actually was foiled by the FBI. He has used his supporters to attack us before. And I think that if you follow through what he wanted to do to like the final outcome, he was trying to forcibly reinstall himself for another 4 years. Had he succeeded in doing that, America would have turned into a dictatorship. And because he failed, a lot of Republicans are just saying, well, let's just let bygones be bygones. It's not a big deal. I think we all know that there's no January exception to presidents being impeached for their conduct. I think it's a disgrace that he was not convicted. And I think it's important for people to remember that not only was this the first time in our country's history that we did not have a peaceful transition of power. We did not. That was taken away from us by former President Trump. That has never happened in the history of our country. Not only that, but assault weapons were found to be in a lot of the cars that were parked outside of the Capitol by some of these folks that were part of this insurrection, they had plans. And their plans were not just to overthrow our government and forcibly reinstall a dictator for another 4 years, but their plans appear to have included possibly inflicting a mass assassination situation in our nation's capital that would have included the vice president, the speaker of the House, and many others. And that's really serious. And so I just want to let you all know, I am having difficulty just letting all of this go because of the attacks that were launched on our country. And gun safety is so important, especially in the context of what happened on January 6th, because we had an assault weapons at one point in our country's history, and we allowed that to lapse. Folks should not have those types of weapons of war. They shouldn't be in civilian hands. All right, I'm going to stop right there.
No, Carlos, we definitely appreciate, I think that's definitely a lot of people's feelings, especially this past week with what happened in the Senate and his effectively an entire party saying that his conduct was acceptable. So I want to then now pass it to Maya and kind of ask also just from like a college student perspective, what was it like seeing it? Because I think that, to be honest, like, it's very hard growing up and hearing about our democracy and how strong it is, and then just seeing it like so viscerally like shattered in a lot of ways.
Yeah, Representative Smith, that was incredible. And I think it really well encapsulated it. But I would like to talk about it a bit, because we did grow up, standing every morning and pledging allegiance to the flag. And a big part of what we learned in school was a pride in our country and an understanding that if you ask an American kid, what's the best country in the world? Like, that's what we're told. We live in the land of the free. And that's a really, really big part of what is instilled in us. So I was at work when I was first told through the March for Our Lives group chat. That's how I found out about what was going on. And there was disgust. There was a feeling of disgust and a feeling of betrayal, like a deep, deep feeling of betrayal, a feeling of confusion, because like Representative Smith said, that's not something that we grew up seeing. That's not how things worked here. We had a democracy that was unshakable in my mind. That was unshakable in, I think, a lot of people's mind. And there was an expectation of a peaceful transition of power that was yanked away very quickly. And I agree with what Representative Smith said as well, that it just feels like, oh, there was an insurrection, there was an attempted coup, and we all moved on. It was a news highlight for a moment and we all moved on. So that was very, very jarring. And absolutely at the crux of it, I think there are many issues that this was a symptom of, but absolutely gun violence and the lack of regulation around assault weapons is a massive issue here. Because if any one of these people is able to, partake in violence incited by the president, the fact that any of them is able to get their hands on a high capacity assault weapon is astounding, is disgusting. So those are the kind of different lenses that, I think that myself and a lot of March for Our Lives saw this through, but it was scary. It was awful. And it was very contradictory to everything that I have grown up learning, having been born in, 99 and going through school and being 21 now. So.
No, yeah, honestly, I agree completely. I think it is very interesting having kind of grown up with this kind of perception. I think and kind of to your point, you said it best, that it's not even, I wouldn't even say it's a college student thing. We've all kind of grown up with this idea that American democracy is so strong and that the peaceful transfer of power is something that we just expect to happen. And I think for it to be kind of that perception to get ripped away was very eye-opening for everybody. So before we move on to the next question, I want to, now that Rep. Hunschofsky's been able to rejoin, just kind of ask the same question to her since she wasn't able to hear it. But to Representative Hunschofsky, what were your feelings when the insurrection happened on January 6th?
Thank you, first of all, for having me here, and thank you for accommodating my bit of driving schedule. It took a little longer than expected. Parkland is really far away from Tallahassee. At first, it was kind of disbelief, and then there was this incredible horror and sadness. And I say sadness because the people who were in the Capitol at the time now know what it's like when people are hiding in fear for their lives. And I know the trauma that many of them, staffers, elected officials, will be experiencing now for the rest of their lives. And that's something that often doesn't get talked about when we talk about gun violence. We talk about gun violence, it happened, and then everybody's like, well, but everybody's back at work and life goes on as normal. And that actually never happens again. No matter whether it's, everyday gun violence, mass gun violence, and even just knowing it could have happened. That is also a traumatic experience. I mean, and I don't think we talk enough about the trauma that comes afterward. And I think if we were to talk about what people go through afterward, that maybe there would be more humanity coming into this discussion. There is a price to pay for the threat of gun violence and for gun violence itself and the aftermath of the trauma. People who all of a sudden now are having PTSD or other issues. And, I remember my kids in Little League and in soccer, you got to be a good sport, whether you win or you lose. And that didn't happen in this transition of power. And I think also what was a little frightening is we saw that, as was said earlier, the things that we thought were just commonplace and things that they just happen because they've always happened. They always happened because people decided there would be a peaceful transition of power. People decided they would accept the people's voice and the people's vote. And to see that didn't happen, and to see the scariness of misinformation and how that can control people, it's very frightening. And I know we're in a new day, but what led to that doesn't just disappear overnight. And I think as a country, we need to really look at how we're doing things, how we're talking to each other, how we're getting information. And because while January 6th has passed, what led to January 6th has not passed.
Representative, I really enjoyed the part where you said bringing in humanity into this debate. It really brings to light that there is no humanity when you are considering the current legislation. Going on top of legislation, recently President Biden, and this is a question for any of our speakers, President Biden just publicly reaffirmed his support for comprehensive background checks, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and eliminating immunity for gun manufacturers from prosecution on February 14th. What is the possibility, in your opinion, that we can actually see passage of these reforms?
I know President Biden that these issues and reforms are near and dear to his heart. It is beyond me why we don't have universal background checks in this country. I believe the polling is like in the high 80s, low 90s of people who, gun owners and non-gun owners alike, support universal background checks. And yet there's something wrong with our political system that universal background checks have such a high approval rating and so much support in our country, and yet they have never happened. Right now, there is an opportunity to make such common sense reform possible because you have a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate and the presidency. So I'm hopeful that many of the reforms will now have potential, but I go back to what we talked about with January 6th. Something is wrong when such a high majority of the country wants certain reforms to happen, and yet our system is not making that happen. And I think while we talk about this issue or any other issue, when the will of the people and the sentiment of the country is not being reflected in the laws, we really need to look at why that is. I mean, and we kind of know why, right? Gerrymandering, all these other things. But there is a broken system then that is not reflecting the sentiment of the country. And that, I think, is one of the core problems we have, not only with gun violence, but with many of the issues where the policy doesn't seem to reflect the will of the people.
Thank you so much. The question is open for anyone as well, if anyone else would like to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with my colleague that we have an incredible opportunity to pass meaningful gun safety reforms. I am very optimistic about the possibility that we can pass universal criminal background checks nationally. I mean, that is a huge deal. And to the rep's point, this is not a heavy lift. It's so popular. It's so popular. So of course, there's so much more that we can do. Of course, we need to look at assault weapons and large capacity magazines. We need national red flag laws, like the one that we have actually in Florida, which actually works really, really well and needs to be expanded. We need more safe storage laws. We need a federal urban gun safety task force for urban communities to help really understand and grasp the gun violence that's happening on the streets every single day. That is not necessarily a mass shooting. My goodness, the list goes on and on and on of things that we can do at the federal level, but I'm very optimistic that we're going to be able to finally pass some of these laws in the near future.
And I agree, Representative Guillermo Smith. I'm optimistic. We have every reason in the world to believe that with the people that are in power, these gun sense champions running the House and the Senate and the Oval Office, we should have every confidence that we are going to see background checks pass at the national level on every gun sale. At the bare minimum, I'm really optimistic about that happening personally. And there was just a whole slew of things that the representative just mentioned between the city gun violence task forces and high capacity magazines and assault weapon bans and all these things. There's so much that can be done, and I think that this is the time, and I expect that we're going to see it done. So I hope that all of our representatives know here in Florida and in Washington, D.C., that we will be following up to make sure that these things are actually happening. Moms Demand Action, we're about getting things done. So we love to help elect gun sense champions like our two representatives here with us tonight. And we also love to hold everybody accountable. And then when you're as amazing as Representative Hunschofsky and Representative Guillermo Smith, then we sing your praises all over too. And we'll help you get reelected if we can. We're here to make sure that it gets done. And I think that it's going to happen this time. I would love to see an executive order for background checks just go through. But that's just me personally. We'll see how long it takes to get some legislation going, but I expect to see something in the first half of this year. I expect we should be able to see our first big, awesome gun safety bill out of the new White House.
Good evening, everyone. Representative Smith, it's wonderful to meet you again. I've had the pleasure of meeting you at a meeting for the, I think it was the Florida Young Democrats over in Tampa at the Italian Club in Ybor. It's wonderful to see you again. And good evening to our other panelists. And thanks to the UCF Dems, the Knights, for organizing this. You know, one of the biggest arguments that a lot of conservatives will say as a means of trying to, talk about the inefficacy of legislation is that as long as you have humans, you're always going to have murder. And I'm sick of that argument because that's not really, it doesn't really do anything to solve the problem. But all legislation in the world, in my opinion, may not really be effective as long as you have people who are only too willing to propagate, fittingly, pun intended, a big lie that gun violence isn't real. And we actually have a lot of people like Taylor Greene and even Boebert and a few other people in Congress who deny a lot of things taking place, whether it's the Sandy Hook shooting in Connecticut or the Parkland shooting over in Florida. We have people who will spread conspiracy theories, believe these theories, and in their own way, when you take a look at people like Alex Jones, they've also played a very big role in some way in the insurrection of the 6th of January. So my opinion is, it's not so much an opinion, but my idea is that we need to do whatever we can to nip this disinformation in the bud. And that means that all of these people who peddle such disgusting conspiracy theories, who don't seem to have any care about the lives of their fellow citizens as long as they can say whatever they want and pander to a rabid base, should be, in fact, cited and indicted. Especially coming off the heels of Rush Limbaugh. He's gone to meet his maker. We can't catch him now. But Alex Jones and a few others should be, cited, and they should be silenced, in my opinion. And when I say silenced, I mean they should no longer have their platform to spread this information, because as long as you're going to have an Alex Jones, you're going to have a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Lauren Boebert, and it's just going to continue. And when you have those crooks at the top, if you will, that's going to be a big obstacle to any kind of progressive change.
Oh, yeah,
if I could just jump in on that, because one of the people mentioned did reference the mass shooting that happened in the city that I was mayor of at the time, still live in Parkland. And many of the people who lost loved ones are people who were and still are my friends. I don't mention their names because some of it is an attempt just to become famous off of the pain that other people have suffered. And, everybody can have different opinions on things, different political ideology. But when you start dismissing something where lives were lost, where people lost their loved ones, and now they feel forced to go and talk about it again and try and tell people and go through that trauma again, at some point, we're not disagreeing on issues. At some point, it goes back to that level of inhumanity. I'm not offended by what these people say. I'm disgusted by it because I know how much it hurts the family members who are of many different political parties. It hurts all of them to their core that someone would speak of their child or their spouse in that way, and the situation where they were killed. So, and that's how I talk about it, because it's so easy to get caught up in the fight that you forget the people you're fighting for, and you forget the humanity in it. And so I'm not offended. I'm disgusted. And this isn't a political back and forth. This is someone being cruel and inhumane and reopening traumatic wounds just to get some more Twitter followers.
No, yeah, it's something that, like, I recently watched a CNN panel, or not a CNN panel, but a CNN video, and it was a mother from Parkland talking about her engagement with one of these individuals. And more than anything, I would just throw in, before we move on, just the cowardice of these people, because they tell these people things behind closed doors when they realize that they're being confronted, but they don't have the guts to admit it publicly. And I think it just really exposes just the cruelty at the end of the day that exists with some of these people. And I think that the hope, unfortunately, that the Republican Party could not hold them accountable, that they will be held accountable both by the powers that be and their voters, hopefully come 2022. So we're going to move on to the next question, but I did want to quickly kind of throw in Maya, if you had anything you wanted to say about either what Representative Hunschofsky just talked about, or in relation to just the general, the Biden reaffirmation of his hope to actually do something about these policies.
Representative, I really liked what you said about not being offended, about being disgusted, because the connotation of offense when coming from that side is very almost condescending. And I agree with what you said, so I just wanted to say that. But when I discussed this question briefly with our policy committee, one word that came up a lot was optimism. So I really think that everybody who spoke on it, there's a lot of optimism here, and there's definitely optimism from us at March for Our Lives and within our policy committee. So I just wanted to say that. I want to manifest it.
Awesome. So that actually leads into our next question, and I'm going to let Erin go, and then Maya can go after, more just because they're organization based, and then we'll move on from the federal side. But in terms of both of your organizations, what are ways that we can effectively lobby for a lot of these policies that we want, both from just a college student perspective, but just in general? How do we either work with organizations like yours and get more engaged, and on an individual level, get more engaged in actually moving the needle? Because Florida, unfortunately, has a lot of people in power who are very antagonistic towards these policies. So how are ways that we can pressure, whether it's Scott and Rubio in the Senate or our Congress members, in order to actually do their job?
Well, each bill there's a unique way, right, that you can pressure people in different ways. But the first thing that I would encourage people to do is to get involved with a local organization that you know and trust. Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, March for Our Lives, Brady. There are a lot of wonderful organizations in and around the state. You can text the word READY to the number 64433 to be connected with Moms Demand Action or Students Demand Action. And one of the things, the reason I say that is, you get hooked up with our text alerts. This is something that you can do that, you're living your life and you're doing your thing, you're getting through your classes, and you can still make a difference in between. You'll get a text, from an organization. You'll get an email from the organization saying, hey, here's what's going on. Here's where we stand on this bill. Here's why. And here's what we want to do about it. Will you join us by doing this? And we always try to give you an actionable item. I know that March for Our Lives is wonderful about that too. They never just send out a message to go, hey guys, they're not wasting your time. If you get a message from them, there's an action there. So you want to make sure that you're catching those things and following up with them, because this is how we move the needle. In Florida, we're used to doing something called losing forward, right? And in gun violence prevention in general. We might lose and lose and lose, but maybe we got that committee to not hear that one real bad bill. Like, that is a huge win for us, right? If we can keep something, tabled just long enough that they take a recess, like, cool. We will take these small victories, and every time we have another bad gun bill put up, you can count on Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, March for Our Lives, and all sorts of engaged gun violence activists everywhere to be up there working for what's right. And it's easy to get involved. You can go to any of these organizations, websites, Twitter handles, anything, and click through and connect. And that is how you start to move the needle. You take the first step. Text READY 64433. That's my plug.
That was a good point. But absolutely, I agree with everything you said. I think that, at least for me, when former President Trump was elected, that sparked a lot of rage in me. And that's really what the catalyst was for me to say, okay, I have to do something. Like, I can't just keep reposting stuff to my story, because that's great and all to be upset and to be aware, but there needs to be action. And like you said, or like my dad would say, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's a million organizations, even just in the state of Florida, who are doing really, really good work. For March for Our Lives, you're totally right. There's so many actionable items. What we're doing right now with HB1 and the anti-protest bill, we had a all call last night, and my portion on that call that I was so like happy to speak at was actionable items. You know, we're doing deep canvassing, we're doing text banking, call banking. I don't like call banks because I get nervous on the phone, so I do the text banking. It's so easy. I sent out like 600 texts yesterday, and I'm a full-time student, so it's like not hard stuff. It's easy stuff. So absolutely, there's a million ways to get involved. Go to marchforourlives.com, get on Instagram. One of the things we do a lot to keep pressure is tweeting, because it's annoying. And Ron DeSantis was getting so many tweets yesterday about HB1. So things like that, easy things you can do from your home that are socially distanced. Get out there, find an organization, and yeah, get involved.
We actually have a saying on one of our t-shirts. It's not an official Moms Demand Action. It's something that I did and did a little fundraiser, and I know that our legislators in the room will be familiar with this concept. You get a lot of people coming up to you when you do work in gun violence prevention, or in your case, you know, just legislation in general, that come and say thank you, right? And the thank you it is so appreciated. And we just want to add an and, like, it's thank you and help us, please. The first step is just taking that first step. So it's thank you and join us.
Thank you so much. Those were all really great answers. So this is a question specifically for our representatives. Can you elaborate a bit on what bills you proposed that would address gun violence?
Sure, I can start. So this legislative session, we have reintroduced for the 5th year in a row legislation to ban assault weapons in large capacity magazines. This is so crucial and so important for the state of Florida. And, you know, we already have a number of co-sponsors, and I've been asked, you know, by a number of advocates, you know, reporters, what's special about this year? Are you going to get the bill heard this year? And, you know, what are your chances? And you know what I tell them? I've said, listen, we obviously are going to have challenges in this Republican-dominated environment in Tallahassee. But one thing that I've learned over the last several years is that there is a brand new generation of advocates, of young people, and a new coalition has essentially emerged in Florida of people who are committed to continuing to fight and see until we see this bill pass into law. A big part of that strength and power in that advocacy comes from the Parkland community. It comes from March for Our Lives. It comes from the students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas and others who were also deeply traumatized by the terrible tragedy in Parkland in 2018, in combination with others like the Pulse community in Central Florida and in Orlando. And what I told a reporter the other day, I think kind of resonated, which is that gun safety advocacy is part of the DNA of this new generation of voters and leaders. And they're going to see this through, because one day Republicans in the legislature are not going to be in the majority. They won't. They're not going to be here forever. And when we have that opportunity to finally make this happen, I know that it's going to be a great day.
That's incredible. 5 years. We talked a bit about optimism before. Have you found difficulty in keeping your hopes up that maybe this year will be the one that pans out?
It's not been difficult because of the fact that we have so many folks who are committed to this work. You know, we had a incredible press event just about 10 days or so ago, where, you know, obviously in the lead up to the 3-year mark of the Parkland tragedy, where, you know, we had Manny Oliver was there. You know, we had March for Our Lives students there. We had Senator Gary Farmer there. We had Gail Schwartz there. It was really refreshing to see so much enthusiasm and so much energy continuing to be behind this bill. And what I also know, you know, I wanted to spend some time talking about that bill and how important it has been, is that there's so much more than that. There's so much more than that bill. There are so many other proposals that are out there. And I know that my colleague is going to want to talk, you know, about some of her legislation that she is supporting this session as well.
Yeah, so thank you, Rep. I filed a safe storage bill. Right now, the safe storage law is only for if a minor under the age of 16 can get their hands on a gun that they're not supposed to. So it would be raising the age to 18 when shootings occur due to negligence. It changes the liable person from the minor's parent to include parent or guardian. And it amends it, the security measure in a securely locked box or container with also a trigger lock or firearm locking mechanism. And it also adds that you have to be given a safety brochure about safe storage when you purchase a firearm. And for those of you who may not know, you know, and I'm sure actually everybody on this Zoom will know, you know, there's been an increase in suicides. Often suicides are happening, especially among young people, because they're obtaining a weapon from the home that they live in. And also in Florida, as also in around the country, we have people who are leaving their firearms unlocked in unlocked vehicles, sometimes even with the key inside. I know that's really hard to believe, but that actually happens. And that is not safe storage. That is not responsible firearm ownership. And I think we need to be taking these things seriously because, you know, it's one thing to have firearms owned by people who, you know, are, you know, have passed all the checks and everything to own them. And it's another thing for a minor to get their hands on it, or someone who normally wouldn't be able to purchase a firearm. And if I could just add on the optimism thing, if you're not an optimist, you should not be in elected office. We are in elected office, and I will be so bold as to also speak for Rep. Smith because we do believe there is always hope. There is always an opportunity to make things better. And that's why we're part of the process. And we have people at home, we have friends, we have family members who always remind us of the important work that needs to get done. Sometimes people get so caught up in the policies that they forget the, as a friend of mine calls it, the people in the homes, the people we're representing, the stories that we're lifting up, and those shared experiences. And it's our job to, you know, really push for policy that's going to make lives better. And if you don't think that tomorrow can be a better day and you can be part of that solution, then you might want to get out of the way.
Rep. Hunschofsky is right. And there's so many other more bills to be optimistic about. I was just looking through the list of bills that have been filed so far this year. I see that I'm reminded that our colleague Representative Dan Daly has filed House Bill 25, which is basically Jamie's Law, which is named after Jamie Gutenberg. And it basically says that background checks would be also required for the purchase of ammunition, in addition to you know, just the firearm advocacy that we've been pushing for universal criminal background checks on the guns themselves. We also know that there's going to be legislation coming. I'm not sure if it's filed yet, but to create a state-based urban gun violence task force as well to really address the gun violence that's happening in communities of color. I think that we're still going to see more bills filed before the deadline, which is actually in about 10 days or so when session begins. But we've seen, of course, the need to expand red flag laws as well, which is legislation that's been filed, legislation to protect people from domestic abusers who are still able to possess their firearm and not have it confiscated from law enforcement. There's even been legislation put forward to tighten up Florida's concealed weapons permit application process. Florida is very lenient, and it's just really easy to get a concealed weapons permit in the state of Florida. For example, you don't even have to demonstrate any sort of marksmanship to actually get a concealed weapons permit, like prove that you know how to use it. You've got to go through a class, which you can do in 90 minutes on a Saturday, but you don't actually have to prove marksmanship there. There's actually a much stronger law in Texas for concealed carry that has been a model that I've used to look at other ideas that we have for legislation. But even beyond that, the list goes even further, and there's a lot that we'll be working on.
No, yeah, we're definitely extremely happy to see the movement from many members of the Democratic caucus within the Florida legislature trying to actually combat what really is just horrific laws in general when it comes to guns in the state of Florida, and just our lack of accountability. So before we move on to just some of the broader questions, I did have one other one to ask. I wanted to first pose it to Maya, but it has to do with the bill, and Carlos will know, from a certain representative from Lakeland who will hopefully not be named because he does not deserve to be named. He is the biggest attention seeker in the Florida legislature. But I think Maya can offer a bit of unique perspective that this bill in particular that he's trying to propose, and he proposed last session as well, would allow students and others to carry firearms on campus. So I kind of wanted to know, based off of, we actually had a debate with college Republicans last year, and they were full throttle supportive of this. And it was very disturbing to watch their justifications and reasons. But I kind of wanted to hear just a little bit about what kind of your thoughts are on that and why this bill is as extreme as it really is.
Sure. Absolutely. So again, I did go over these questions with policy, with Logan in policy, and we actually discussed that debate. And if I'm not mistaken, this has been discussed for 4 years, maybe before this year, this bill, and it has not passed. And there's reasons why. I really want to talk a little bit about the issue of suicide. Mental illness and mental health problems are very common on college campuses. And it is incredibly important that we keep guns out of the hands of students, professors, anyone on college campuses, whether they're a student there or not, out of the hands of people who may be in those situations and struggling in that way. March for Our Lives is also doing a lot of work on the other side of that with mental health and access for mental health for students. But that's one thing that I do want to address because it's a very real issue, and it might not be the first thing that we think of when we consider the dangers of having firearms on campuses, but it is absolutely a danger and it's absolutely a threat. The second thing is, I think one of the things that was brought up in that debate from the college Republicans was the idea that students needed to be able to defend themselves, like female students need to be able to defend themselves. And one of the points, again, that was brought up by college Democrats, I believe, was, also addressing the issue of attacks against girls and boys on college campuses. There needs to be a widespread, policies, all sorts of things done to address these root issues, not just like the symptoms of these issues on campus. So when it's suggested that, more guns on campus and the ability to carry guns on campus legally might in some way protect students from attacks by other students or other people on campus, there's really a disconnect there. And that was really what we were kind of discussing in regards to the, with the committee or with the policy committee. Furthermore, I think that this discussion of trauma and this human side of this issue is really important when we're discussing open carry or carry on campus, because it's true. I think even those of us who were fortunate enough not to be directly in these situations have watched this growing up. We watched, Sandy Hook. We watched all of these events happening. We had the drills, and that was traumatic. That was really, really scary, even for those of us not directly affected or directly in those communities. So I absolutely think that there is a psychological element and a human element to something like this being proposed, and something like this being supported by college Republicans so aggressively. That is really dismissive of the experiences of many students and faculty and staff who live, not only work, visit, and learn, who live on college campuses. Because I lived in a dorm too, and I know that's not something I'd be comfortable with. So I just wanted to kind of bring those different perspectives up.
And Maya is so right when she talks about gun suicide, which is not something that comes up all the time. But, suicide does account for 2/3 of all gun violence. And you'll hear people that say like, oh, that's not gun violence. But I promise you there are a few things more violent than a gun suicide. And so that is a huge concern with a young population like you have on a campus. And just having the presence of a firearm increases your risk for completing suicide 3 times. So it's 300% more likely to actually complete suicide if a firearm is just present. So, Maya's points are so super valid. And it is something that, I hope that we really get to hear about in Tallahassee before anybody makes any decisions on this bill.
Yeah, can I add to that and just say, because those arguments, that some of these same arguments come up all the time, like, oh, there's so much sexual assault on college campuses. Don't you want female students to carry weapons? No, that it's not going to make female students more safe. To Erin's point, the specific statistic is that women are 500 times more likely to be killed by an intimate partner if a firearm is present. Sexual assault is rarely perpetrated by a stranger. In fact, 90% of college sexual assaults are committed by someone the victim knows. Are you going to be carrying a gun when you're hanging out with someone that you know? Not really. So, and there's so many more statistics, and we know based on the facts that allowing for campus carry will not make students more safe, and specifically female students who can sometimes be the targets of sexual assault.
And if I could just jump in, I was at a round table, I think it was like 2015, so before a lot of this talk was coming up, and we talked about campus carry because it was an issue back then, and former Senate President John Thrasher, who's a Republican, was the president of FSU, is also opposed to campus carry. And at this roundtable that was hosted by Congressman Ted Deutsch at the time, we had school, university law enforcement, regular law enforcement, and people from various universities there. And not one of them supported campus carry. So if these are the experts, these are the ones in charge of keeping students safe, wouldn't they know best what the best way would be to do that? And none of them felt campus carry was that way to do that. And the police had brought up the example of if you have campus carry, if they're trying to actually find a suspect or something, you might not know who's the good guy and who's not the good guy.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And I just wanted to thank everyone for adding those points. Once again, just a couple things I want to emphasize before we move on. yes, mental illness among college students is rife, among everyone is rife, especially right now. We need to address the core issues here. Adding guns into the equation is not the solution. And the fact that that is not, a simple thought process is concerning in some ways. But yes, mental health and suicide by gun are massive issues here, like you mentioned. 2, I know for a fact, because I am a woman on a college campus, that sexual assaults and attempted sexual assaults are absolutely most often perpetrated by people that you know. I could go through my friend group and have that discussion, and none of us are going to a house party at our friends on, Corona barred. We're not going to a house party at our friends and bringing a firearm for self-protection. That's not happening. And again, I know that I'm in college. Some of you guys obviously are beyond those days, but you can think back to college and think of some of the things that happen in college. Fights over parking spots that happen every first week of school. All of these things that happen in college that, because we're young and we are having our freedoms for the first time, are not made better by a firearm being present. So I think a lot of that, I know this is maybe not the best phrase, but a lot of these things are common sense when you think about adding firearms into the college campus equation.
Thank you so much. These different perspectives, I think, are really enriching this panel. We're actually going to move on to a different topic, and this is addressed to any of our speakers, so feel free to jump in. In the last several months in the US history, it has shown us, if nothing else, that police militarization remains a pressing issue in the effort to combat gun violence. What is the biggest obstacle for police reform? And secondly, how can legislation contribute to reform?
Well, I think that one of the biggest obstacles to police reform is actually the law enforcement lobby. The law enforcement lobby in Tallahassee particularly is very strong as far as, opposing so many of the important reforms that have been proposed. Now, this session, there has been a incredible comprehensive package of reforms that have been introduced that I think can give us some hope about what we can be able to achieve and what legislatively is really coming from some of the demonstrations over the summer. Certainly the Black Lives Matter movement. And while we say those, we have to commit ourselves to the actions that those words actually require. And some of these legislative actions I want to tell you about. We have a bill by Representative Benjamin and Senator Powell that basically limits and defines no-knock search warrants so that those are restricted in the state of Florida. Obviously, we know a lot about no-knock search warrants tragically because of Breonna Taylor. We have House Bill 569, which is Representative Chambliss with Senator Bracey, which requires body and dashboard cameras. We have legislation from Representative Hinson that repeals Stand Your Ground. We have Representative Omfroy and Powell, who have a use of force database that will be helpful in being able to track when law enforcement does use of force. We know that Representative Geraldine Thompson has filed legislation that creates a statewide police misconduct registry so that bad cops are not simply leaving certain law enforcement agencies after bad behavior and then being rehired by other law enforcement agencies. That's House Bill 277. And one of the big ones is reforming qualified immunity. That's House Bill 261 and Senate Bill 261 by Representative Rayner and Senator Chevron Jones. We know that qualified immunity can shield individuals from civil lawsuits despite egregious behavior. That's, members of law enforcement. And this will add more accountability for the actions of law enforcement, like the ones who were involved in the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. There's so much more, but I'm just going to leave it there.
I can talk a little bit about this. I really appreciate Representative Smith that aspect and that viewpoint, because obviously it's a little different from the March for Our Lives perspective. But that makes me really optimistic, honestly, to hear that. There's a ton of anger around this and a ton of passion around this. And I think that we absolutely saw that over the summer with all of the marches, which were excellent. But once again, as we've been talking about on this call, action is so important, and continuing that energy into actionable work is important. From the March for Our Lives perspective, I do want to take it back to talking about the DeSantis anti-protest bill, which is a awful bill that really, really would, even thinking about, when I was protesting, going back to what I saw and what I was able to participate in, would really harm even the people that were peacefully protesting and making their voices heard there. This bill would make it so that protesters could have up to, or a minimum of, 6 months jail time, even in situations where, violence is perpetrated by officers upon protesters. And when protesters stand up for themselves and protect themselves, they're the ones facing consequences. Law enforcement should never be operating extrajudicially. There should be consequences and accountability for cops who are behaving in ways that are inappropriate and leading to murder and death. So I'm really excited to hear about the registry bill, about the qualified immunity bill. These are really, really important things that I'm sure March will absolutely hop on, and we'll deep canvass, we'll get out the texts, we will have people calling their reps. We will absolutely get that done. But just something that March is doing is really focusing on this HB1 issue and this bill from DeSantis, which if you want to learn more about, you can go to the March for Our Lives Florida Instagram, and there's lots of actionable pieces that you can actually get involved with for stopping that bill.
Oh yeah, this remains an extremely pressing issue, and I think last year definitely highlighted kind of the need. We've definitely seen the need, particularly in Florida, because I think we can go as far back as the Trayvon Martin case, if not even further back, where this has been something that Florida in particular has been dealing with. So no, I definitely think that kind of what Carlos was saying, the list of those bills, it's great to see a lot of movement in that area, because we know that this is a very difficult subject, especially for a lot of politicians and people who they rely on the support of law enforcement and police union cooperation, et cetera. So being able to actively take on those elements and work with them when we can, but also stand up when they're the roadblock is extremely important. So I just kind of want to shift gears a little, and I want to ask both Maya and Erin about something that I guess you could almost say is not so much a cultural thing, but something that in particular from an organizational standpoint has been a pretty big phenomenon this past about year and a half or so. And that was anytime the National Rifle Association has ended up in the news, it's because of scandal after scandal after scandal. Because who would have thought having the same president for like 20 plus years who was hoarding money to go to like Cancun and all that would be a little sketch at best. So I want to ask first to Erin, how has the NRA's recent legal problems and their decision to try to file bankruptcy in New York to get to Texas, how has all of that kind of impacted your efforts as an organization, kind of seeing this titan of the gun rights lobby effectively almost getting knocked down in a lot of ways?
We love it. We love it. We worked really hard for it. So did so many other people. We applaud it. I want to see more of it. I don't want to see them moving to Texas. I want to see them gone, gone, gone. And you can bet that all our volunteers, all those 6 million supporters, we're all going to be working together until the day we see them completely gone. It's awesome. I think it's kind of funny. It's a little bit of, getting what they deserve, just in the smallest amount, because their organization has done a lot of harm over the years. And so we're real happy about it. And we're ready for more. But they've always tried to use Florida as their petri dish, test it out and see how this real bad gun bill is going to do. And if we can mess around in Florida, let's see how we can do it in other places. They've abused Florida specifically. So we're happy, real happy.
Absolutely. I was going to say gleeful. Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of happiness. I do also think, and again, this was another question that I took to the policy committee, and, it was kind of a thing like they're out of the way. It's like a tick, it's a pain. And we're happy to see the NRA out of our way. We're happy to see them. Again, we don't want to see them moving to Texas. We want to see them gone because we have work to do. We're trying to move forward, and that's a speed bump that we don't need. The other thing was, they're facing all the loss of all of this funding, the loss of all this money. With less money, they have less power. And that's what we want to continue to see happen. We want to see the draining of that money, the draining of that power, so we can continue to do the work. And they're a thing of the past because it is what they deserve. They have done a lot of harm, especially to Florida. So it's personal. It is personal. So yeah, very happy, very gleeful.
One thing I would add to that, to the NRA conversation, fun fact, I was once honored by the NRA. In 2018, I was one of 2 lawmakers in the state of Florida out of 160 who received an F- rating from the NRA. And that was me and former state representative Jared Moskowitz, who each earned an F- from the NRA, which is actually different from FX. FX is like some other weird marking they give to mostly Democratic legislators, but the F- is actually a very, very special honor.
No, yeah, that's it's definitely the best honor I think you could receive from an organization.
Exactly.
And before I pass on Danielle, I would also just throw in, like, I personally, the NRA is it's a very sad organization because they have so contorted the rights of people. In many cases, a lot of people who think that as gun owners, they're representing their interests, when it's very clear that the NRA is representing the gun manufacturers more than anybody else. And it's an organization that when you look at what it was 50, 75 plus years ago to what it is now, it's a shell of its former self. And it's something that all of this is great to see. They popularized the term, take it from their cold, dead hands. And they're almost there at this rate with at the speed that they're going. So it's nice to see. But I'm going to pass it on to Daniela.
Almost there, Dylan. Really keeping up that optimism trend here. This goes for any of our speakers. So we've touched a bit tonight on the different factors that contribute to gun violence. How can funding other social services contribute to a reduction in gun violence?
If I could jump in on that one, I think it's been said over and over again, the rise in suicides, suicides being such a large part of gun violence. So an easy one, in my opinion, to invest in is mental health access, quality mental health services. I would like to refer everybody to the 3rd interim grand report from the grand jury that came out, I don't know, a month or so ago, that basically eviscerated when they talked about the mental health system in the state of Florida, that it is such a complete mess. It's impossible to even call it a system. The system was built around where the funding is coming from, as opposed to how it can best serve the public. And depending on where you begin or enter the mental health system, whether you start through school or some other way, that's going to then determine what type of services you receive. So I think we have, and this isn't to equate gun violence and mental health, but mental health is at a crisis point in our country. And I think we need to be investing there. Suicide is on the rise. Suicide is a large part of gun violence is attributed to suicide. And I think that's really where also from the country as a whole, investing in quality mental health care, mental health parity, and all that would be very important.
And I would add to that and say that a way that gun violence can be reduced, specifically as it relates to, you know, possible use of force by law enforcement, is by investing in social service programs where law enforcement, where cops with guns are not necessarily the persons being sent to deal with a homeless person, to deal with a mental health crisis, to deal with other social crises that happen that actually oftentimes when you send law enforcement with a firearm, that can unnecessarily escalate a situation. That does not mean that we would send social workers into harm's way. You know, that would be for, you know, nonviolent incidences. But I know that there's many municipalities in the state of Florida. I believe it started with St. Petersburg, and now the city of Orlando is also exploring this, you know, the possibility of, you know, investing in more of these social services and social worker responsibilities to take over in nonviolent calls that usually we're used to sending cops with guns, which is not always necessary.
Absolutely. I think what both of you said was incredibly relevant. This is an issue that's really, really important to me because from a young age, I have been navigating the mental health system, and it is a nightmare. And I had a very supportive family, and I was really, really lucky and privileged to have insurance, to have the money to be able to afford these things because they are not cheap. When somebody is mentally ill, things come into the equation like homelessness. Things come into the equation like not being able to get up and go to work. So when we don't have social services in place to help people when they're at this lowest point in their lives, in many cases, that's when suicide becomes an issue. That's when homelessness and foodlessness become an issue. So absolutely, these things need to be funded. Absolutely. And then to echo a little bit of what Representative Smith said, again, think about getting pulled over. That's stressful. If you are in crisis and a wellness check is sent and there's blue and red lights flashing and there's a cop at your door, seeing a cop is never something I think that is relaxing to most people, or that's something that's going to help you calm down. There is a lot of escalation. We know police escalation is an issue, and in instances of mental health is beyond me. Why? Obviously, it would have to be a non-violent situation, but why a mental health professional wouldn't respond to that? Why would we send someone who, you know, isn't cut out for the job? I think that's unfair to the person, and it's unfair to the law enforcement officer because that's not the situation they were trained for, frankly. So I absolutely think we will see not only a reduction in violence, a reduction in, you know, poverty and in violent crime if we're addressing these root causes. I feel like I keep saying root causes. That's a really big issue that needs to be addressed because these things that we're seeing are symptoms of larger systemic issues and larger systemic shortcomings that we're dealing with not only in Florida but nationally. So I really, really like what I heard from both representatives.
No, yeah, I definitely think that this is an issue, and Maya kind of touched on it. I think in particular that in regards to at least the wellness check side, and when you ask most law enforcement people about it, they don't like that they're the ones that have to do it because they know that they're not properly equipped or trained for those situations. So I think that a part of it is just the burden that has been placed on law enforcement on this issue, when it would be so much easier that we can lift that burden if we provided that for these social services that in ways can work together and in some ways be able to work separately to be able to maximize their effectiveness. I just think it's one of those issues where there can definitely be, I think, a lot of positive movement if we all kind of coordinate around these kinds of just general ideas that the burden of society doesn't have to fall on law enforcement alone. And I think at the end of the day, everybody benefits. So we're nearing the end time. So I just had one final question I wanted to ask everybody, because we've kind of a general theme that I think we've all been trying to reinforce is the general sense of optimism going into the former guy in the White House no longer is in the White House. It's a new era in a lot of ways. Still a lot of problems, but a new opportunity, a fresh opportunity. So to kind of just ask all four of our panelists, both how are ways that people can, like we kind of talked about before, just get involved both with the state level and the federal, and then also just how can we maintain that optimism? Because I think, especially with college students, but just people in general, it's so easy to get so cynical about the things going on in our country, that how do we kind of maintain that optimism? And I want to use, because one of our fellow reps, Anna Escamani, kind of uses the happy warrior kind of mentality. Like, how do we maintain that when we're kind of motivated to fight for these issues?
One way to maintain that happy warrior is to keep your community, right? And it's to be with other people that are not just wanting these same things, but are working towards these same things. You know, finding a community, whether it's with activists or whoever it is, that helps you keep that happy warrior going. That helps you, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with one of Moms Demand Action's hashtags, kind of our motto. It's keep going, right? And the way you do that is by having that support system, whether it's people that you surround yourself with in a friend, you know, that are friends, if it's your family, or it's a little bit of everything. But it's surrounding yourself with good people. It's taking time for yourself. You know, the whole "you can't pour from an empty cup" is really true. So you do have to incorporate some self-care and incorporate a lot of community. And that's how you keep going. That's how I keep going. You know, I'm a mom of 3. I have a teenager. I have a first grader too. So I have, and one in the middle. And I, you know, work. My husband works all the time. I am a busy volunteer. I work in politics. And I'm a recent cancer survivor. And so we have all sorts of like busy in my life. But what keeps me going is my community and my people. And to the question about how do people get involved, I know I already plugged our really quick text thing, text prompt that you can send off. But really, it's find who you connect with. Are you you know, connecting with your college Dems, connecting with March for Our Lives, or an organization that just kind of speaks to you. It's really easy to find out how to get connected online. You just have to do it. So, I mean, get involved and then find your people and then stay with them. Take care of you and you guys take care of each other. That's how I do Happy Warrior anyway.
Well, and I would add to that and agree, you know, that as far as, you know, how you can make an impact, I've always told people just volunteer for organizations that are aligned and politically engaged and civically engaged, so that you can, you know, so that you can really become a grassroots advocate, that you can really stay involved in the process. That's what I did. Yeah, I see March for Our Lives, you know, on the issue of obviously gun violence prevention. getting engaged with Moms Demand or March for Our Lives is a really, really great way to stay involved on the issue and to pressure your elected officials and be engaged in that way. And as far as what keeps me focused, I've been saying this for 5 years because it's true. So I always wear this pin. I always have this ribbon on my jacket. It's like it never comes off. It switches jackets actually. It goes from one to the next depending on what I'm wearing on that day. But there's a reason I always wear it. It's because when I see it, especially when I'm on the House floor, where I actually have another Pulse ribbon taped on my desk in front of my name, where I have the yes, no button, like the green, red button, it really keeps me grounded on why I believe I'm here as an elected state representative. It's to honor them with action, honor the 49, and to be focused on what really matters, which is life, liberty, and equality for everyone. I didn't get a chance to share with you, my story related to gun violence, but I was elected in 2016 to represent this area, not even 6 months after the horrific shooting at Pulse nightclub. 49 mostly LGBTQ people of color were murdered. I have an acquaintance who died at Pulse. I have friends who survived with certainly emotional wounds, and I have friends that survived with physical wounds who were shot multiple times and barely survived. I'm very close with Pulse moms and dads and sisters and brothers who lost loved ones, and I've seen just how gun violence can rip people's lives apart, how it can rip their bodies apart. And, I made a commitment, the commitment being that we would constantly fight to honor their memory, to honor them with action, and to advocate for gun violence prevention in the state of Florida. And, certainly my heart broke when it happened again in Parkland. So we stay committed to the work, and that keeps us grounded.
That was really, really beautiful. And I really appreciate that, and you sharing your truth and your honesty, because like Representative Hunschofsky was saying, there's a human element to this. And I think it is easy to lose sight of that this is very human. Like when you said how it tears your soul apart, how it tears your body apart, like that's real. Like that is where this is coming from. And I think that humanity is missing in this conversation a lot. But yeah, there's a commitment. There's an understanding, I think, from everyone on this call would agree with this, that once you see this happening, you cannot not do the work. There's no way where you can wake up and go to bed and not do the work and not be committed to doing that work. For me, my community and where I come at it from is, my race is a big part and my gender are a big part of what I do. And those identities are a big part of what I do. So that is part of it. And that emotion that just keeps you going. Obviously, self-care is a big part of it too. I'm always going to be the mental health advocate. Like that's always going to be my thing. And self-care is so important. You can't pour from an empty cup. That's so true. And these things are emotionally taxing. Watching this is emotionally taxing. It's traumatic. We have all endured so much trauma to get to this point, from a community standpoint, people from a personal standpoint. So yeah, there's so much you could do to keep you moving and to keep you healthy in this work, because it is taxing, demanding work. And you cannot help but have optimism, or you can't do it. You can't do this work if you don't have that optimism. So I really admire everyone, every adult on this call. I want to grow up to do the things you do and to be just like you. And I hope that I can continue to do that through my March for Our Lives group and get involved. You have to get involved like that. Exactly. You just have to text, follow, all the things you could do to get involved as well. So that's kind of like my input.
I'm going to jump in here. I can't say how to get better. I can't better say how to get involved than has already been said. But I will talk about how you stay optimistic, or at least I do. I also look at the things that didn't seem possible years ago that ended up becoming possible because people kept in the fight. All sorts of rights. But even just after Parkland, some of the firearm legislation that came that no one would have ever said could have happened in Florida. And on my days where I feel, life sucks, it's tough out there, I remember all the people who've been there for me personally and for my community. So actually on February 14th this year, I contacted people who had been people who had made a difference in the community and for me guiding the community after the shooting. And I thank them for being there. I think so often when we want to make a difference, we feel like this huge burden is on us that if we don't make it, then we failed. When no change ever happened overnight. It was lots of people, a part of a process, those happy warriors. And so it's really important to not put that burden on yourself that you have to carry this big lift. There are a lot of people in it together. Like Erin was saying, finding those people you connect with, those groups that you connect with. And every day, I mean, I know personally I focus on, oh my goodness, I did this wrong or I did that wrong. But I also try and focus on the things that went right. Erin and I were both Pete supporters. And one of the things that Pete Buttigieg talked about was joy. And after February 14th, and I looked every day for those moments of joy. Those moments where somebody did something nice, they didn't have to do, they weren't asked to do, but they just did it. Because so often we focus on what's wrong, that I need to look at also what's right in order to get the energy to work against what's wrong. And those are just some of the things I do. There are way many, many, many more good people in this world. There are so many people who want to connect and make a difference. Surround yourself with those people, but also notice those people because they're not always the loudest in the room. And then I look at my kids who are now almost 23 and the younger one's 20. And I want this world to be a better place for them. And so it sounds really idealistic, but there really is a lot of good in this world. And when you're focusing on fixing the bad, it's important to take those moments to also notice all the good around you and all the people who helped you be who you are and supported you in what you're doing, because no one does it alone. And to know that you're not alone is also very powerful.
Well, I want to thank all of you guys for coming out today. That was, especially that last segment was very powerful from all four of you. I'm almost at like a loss of words, honestly. It's true at the heart of it is it's it might sound kind of like how you said, Rep. Hunschofsky, very idealistic, but at the end of the day, like if we're not almost dreaming, who's gonna like that?
Gotta dream big. Gotta go get it.
And I guess to paraphrase, I think it was I know it was Barack Obama that said that our values calling us to care for people we may never even meet. And I think that, like, sadly, in the state of Florida, a lot of us have personal direct engagement with a lot of these tragedies that we've seen. But in a lot of ways, we see things happening here and across the country where at the heart of it, kind of what we've been talking about throughout this whole thing, it's a human thing, that it's empathy, it's having empathy and realizing that the way that the system is now is broken. The way that in a lot of ways our society is now is broken, and kind of how do we keep pushing forward and fighting to make it a better place than when we entered it. So with all that said, I want to thank our panelists for coming out today. I want to thank Representatives Carlos Guillermo-Smith and Christine Hunschofsky, and then I want to thank Erin from Moms Demand Action and Maya from March for Our Lives Florida. You all have been amazing. I also want to thank the University of Tampa College Democrats for taking part and participating. Extend my thanks, particularly, like I said at the beginning, to Claire, their president, for working with me to set all this up. And I just want to thank all of you guys on behalf of College Democrats at UCF. This was great. And I honestly, I appreciate all of you guys coming out today. This was a great conversation, and I hope in the future we can keep this dialogue going, because it needs to continue.
Thank you all. Thank you for hosting us. It was a great dialogue, a great discussion.
Yes, and this is a moment of optimism and joy.
Yes.
It's
keep
wonderful.
that one in
Thank
your
you for
pocket
doing
when
this.
You need to smile again. We need
Yes.
a group hug, guys.
I know. After Corona, that's really what we need. We need a group hug and to go to like Olive Garden and eat a lot of pasta.